Hello and welcome to the first episode of Seneca's Lovely Letters. In this series, I'll be going through my favourite of Seneca's letters to Lucilius, as can be read in Letters from a Stoic or Seneca's Letters on Ethics. Before we begin, let's briefly introduce Seneca and his letters. Seneca was an advisor to Emperor Nero, as well as a Stoic philosopher. These letters were written to a young man called Lucilius, who is only known through Seneca's writings. The letters are about how one uses philosophy to live a good life. But why do we need philosophy? I think that by reading these letters, you'll understand the importance of having a philosophy of life to fall back on whenever life gets challenging. Seneca makes a strong case for philosophy, but this may not be the kind of philosophy you expect. And by the way, you don't need to understand Stoicism to understand this series. All newcomers are welcome. Okay, let's take a look at letter 1, on taking charge of your time. I won't read the whole letter. I'll pick out the key bits I want to discuss in today's episode. However, the full letter will be in the show notes. Dear Lucilius, gather and guard the time that until now has been taken from you, or was stolen from you, or that slipped away. Can you show me even one person who sets a price on his time, who knows the worth of a day, who realizes that every day is a day when he is dying? In fact, we are wrong to think that death lies ahead. Much of it has passed us by already. For all our past life is in the grip of death. Embrace every hour. If you lay hands on today, you will find you are less dependent on tomorrow. While you delay, life speeds on by. Everything we have belongs to others, Lucilius. Time alone is ours. Nature has put us in possession of this one thing, this fleeting, slippery thing. And anyone who wants to can dispossess us. Such is the foolishness of mortal beings. When they borrow the smallest, cheapest items, such as can easily be replaced, they acknowledge the debt. But no one considers himself indebted for taking up our time. Yet this is the one loan that even those who are grateful cannot repay. Seneca. The imagery of guarding your time is quite interesting. We tend to guard our possessions by getting insurance for our house, car, laptop, phone, and pets. We guard our things, but we tend not to guard our time. We often waste it. Seneca is explaining that there is value in our time, as it's finite, and the circumstances we are enjoying currently may not last for very long. But we don't think in this way. We are quite casual with our use of time. We are happy for hours to slip away in social media rabbit holes, or engage in arguments about trivial matters. There is a reason we put more of a value on possessions than time. It is because we are aware of poverty. We see homeless people on the street, we watch poor people on TV, and we know the benefits of wealth. We are aware of what it means to have monetary wealth, possessions, and status. So we put a lot of value on these things. But there is a different kind of poverty we aren't aware of. A poverty of time. When we see people scrolling on social media for hours on their phones, do we think they are impoverished? In a sense, they are. They're allowing their time to be stolen by social media algorithms. They haven't taken the time to assess the value of time. So what is the greater poverty? Having little money or wasting one's time? And what is the greater wealth? Having lots of money or making the best use of your time? What is the point of being rich if you don't know how to spend your time well? Seneca asks, can you show me even one person who sets a price on his time, who knows the worth of a day, who realizes that every day is a day when he is dying? Most of us keep away from death. We rarely see people dying. There are videos on YouTube of young people being diagnosed with terminal health conditions and living their final days. These people, before their diagnosis, didn't put a price on time, but now they make the most of every second they have left. A terminal patient knows that every day is a day when he is dying, because he knows when he's going to die. But it's the same with those without terminal illnesses. We may not know the date of our death, but with every passing day, we're getting older and closer to our graves. Seneca is asking us to be aware of the dying, to be aware of the value they put on their time. Why can't you do the same? Our time is also limited. We are also dying. But death isn't exclusive to our final days. Throughout our lives, we've experienced many small deaths. Seneca says, "We are wrong to think that death lies ahead. Much of it has passed us by already, for all our past life is in the grip of death." What does Seneca mean by saying that we've been in the grip of death? Well, think back to the beginning of this episode. The you who decided to listen to this episode is dead. And the you who listened to me saying that the past you decided to listen to this episode is also dead. Every moment we die to the past. Yesterday is now being buried in the grave of time, and that will be the fate of today. Think back to your childhood. There was the last time you jumped on a bouncy castle, did a hula hoop, went down a slide. We need to be aware that we are always in the grip of death. So we should stop and look around once in a while. Appreciate the moment we are in. Wherever you are and whatever you're doing, that moment will end. So you might as well make the most of it. What is there to see, hear, smell, touch? What are you feeling? What's your internal state? When I look back at the video version of this podcast when I'm editing, I'll be looking at my past self. All the aliveness of those moments is being freshly buried in the grave of time. So take stock. Think back on the previous scenes of your life. Where are they now? Grappling with this idea that we are constantly in the grip of death makes our actual death less frightening. If we can understand that experience changes, we can understand that our form will change too. Everything ends. Activities, thoughts, emotions, and people's lives end too. It is all a part of nature. Seneca asks Lucilius to embrace every hour. If you lay hands on today, you will find you are less dependent on tomorrow. While you delay, life speeds on by. Laying hands on today means being intentional with your time. If we waste the day, we put pressure on tomorrow to be a more productive and meaningful day. We assume we'll be granted another day, which is not guaranteed. This leads to a frustrating cycle of relying on tomorrow for fulfillment. But tomorrow never comes, and today is all we have. So we keep our hands off making the most of today and try to grab the dream of tomorrow. But that dream is a phantom. It has no substance and cannot be relied on. Being intentional with your time makes the day feel meaningful. You can feel the weight of half an hour if you spend it doing one activity mindfully. Listening to this podcast, for example. But if you were to waste half an hour on TikTok, the time would go quickly, slip away. When time is stolen, life speeds by, and we don't feel like we have enough time to achieve meaningful things. When time is embraced, when we lay our hands on every hour, we make the most of our time. Seneca said nature has put us in possession of this one thing, this fleeting, slippery thing, and anyone who wants to can dispossess us. This reminds me of an exchange between Frodo and Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings. It goes like this. "I wish it need not have happened in my time," said Frodo. "So do I," said Gandalf, "and so do all who live to see such times. But that is not for them to decide. All we have to decide is what to do with the time that is given us." We can't decide what happens to us, but we can decide what to do with the time that is given us. It may be a short life, but nothing stops us from making the best use of the present moment. A short life and a long life are losing the same thing, the present. But what does it even mean to be spending time properly? The way we spend our time comes from our values, what is important to us. The Stoics would say the most important thing is virtue. Virtue is the highest good and the foundation of a fulfilling life, encompassing wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance, which are interconnected and essential for living in accordance with nature and reason. I won't go too much into these in this episode, but essentially we must spend our time educating ourselves and incorporating wisdom into our lives, ritualizing wisdom, doing what is morally right, justice, challenging ourselves so we can grow and be a benefit to our community, courage, and living in moderation by keeping an eye on our impulses, temperance. A good way to think about how you can spend your time is to ask yourself what in your life brings value and meaning, and what is a distraction. The book Atomic Habits is a high recommendation if you want to start implementing good habits and expunging bad ones. At the end of this episode, I'll go through an activity you can incorporate to start making better use of your time. Seneca said, "Such is the foolishness of mortal beings. When they borrow the smallest, cheapest items, such as can easily be replaced, they acknowledge the debt. But no one considers himself indebted for taking up our time. Yet this is the one loan that even those who are grateful cannot repay." If someone owes you money, you expect repayment. This is because, as explained before, we put a value on money. But if someone wastes your time, you don't expect to be paid back in time. For most, a friend who pays you back is more valuable than a friend who wastes your time. This is due to us putting too much value on money and not enough on our own time. This goes both ways. We should check in with ourselves to see if we are wasting our friends' time. Do they need to hear this anecdote? Is this an argument worth falling out over? Am I boring them? Talking too much rather than listening? Think back on your interactions with friends and evaluate how much of that time was spent well. Did you feel time casually slipping away? Or was it flying by because you were enjoying each other's company? Did you feel like they valued your time? Whatever metric you use for friendship, put your interactions to the test. Was your friend listening to you? Did you feel seen? As explained, we should put value on our time, and by extension, who we spend our time with. Do they add to the moment or detract from it? And if I'm being honest with myself, would I preferred my own company? Would I preferred to read a book? In the words of Oscar Wilde, a bore is someone who deprives you of solitude without providing you with company. We must be on guard to prevent our time from slipping away. This requires intentionality, a set of values, good habits, and living in the present. So what can you do now to make better use of your time? For me, the most important thing is intentionality. I've begun the habit of writing a to-do list at the start of each day. This has helped me get a lot more writing done for this podcast and my Substack. Before writing a to-do list, I would do my work at the beginning of the day and see what time I had left for writing. This could mean I write a good chunk or hardly anything at all. Because I value writing, I decided to make it the main thing I do in the morning. So, in my to-do list, I am assigning 3 hours to writing. This came about by assessing what I value and making time for it. You can say that you will do something at some point in the day, but actually blocking some time to it, laying hands on today, in the words of Seneca, makes it more likely to happen. When the day begins, lay your hands on it. What do you want to get done that you've been putting off? Don't rely on tomorrow. See if you can make the most of today. That's it for today's episode. If you like my first podcast episode and first episode of Seneca's Lovely Letters, leave a comment or write a review. Thanks for listening. And if you'd like to follow along with this series, I wouldn't actually recommend this edition of Letters from a Stoic, the Penguin Classics edition. I'd recommend Chicago University Press's edition, which has all the letters and none of them are edited. So it's probably the edition I'll be getting at some point. Okay. Thanks again for listening and see you next time.